Alrighty, getting comfortable here with my first solo video practice notwithstanding. Let's get into it. Does it ever feel to you like the kind of leaders we see on screens aren't real leaders at all? Like they're people who got into leadership positions feigning the character of the kind of leaders we want to be looking up to, that we would like to aspire to be. Welcome, listener. My name is Seven. I'm the host of this show, Lost in Searching, and welcome. We've started off our week strong with a few of some of the coolest people in my network, but I realized that I never gave anyone an introduction to me. I kind of just jumped into it. And there's a good reason for that. It's kind of because I'm not really sure what's worth saying. I'm kind of defined by a lot of failure and don't have any notable successes under my belt. I'm not someone who's coming on here because I have all the experience or potentially any of the answers. But one thing I do have is excitement. Excitement and passion and energy for the future, but the kind of future that we can create when people like yourself and our guests are all coming together, but also individually working to make tomorrow the best they can be. And you can only do that by taking a lead in some way, shape, or form, by being the kind of leader that our world really needs. But let me slow down and give you a little bit of background so you kind of maybe can understand the perspective I'm coming at some of our conversations with. A little bit about me. I was born in Los Angeles, California, and had a challenging childhood. I lost a lot of people and didn't have many people to begin with. I experienced houselessness, homelessness, rough sleeping, and a lot of other challenges that as I got older affected everything from my physical health to my mental and emotional health and my ability to show up in the world. And naturally, as we all do, I was on a journey of my own to discover a lot of things. When I was a young teenager, I got the chance to move to London, UK, which is where I live now and where most of my network and career have been and where a lot of our guests in the early stage of the show are based. Going through the motions, I started teaching myself, both intentionally, but only after kind of starting by accident, a lot about philosophy, psychology, and people, the way we work and why we work, everything from our inner drivers to the way our brains work and the neurology behind what drives us in the frame of reference that we look at the world from, deeper philosophical questions, straight through to how that manifests in the world. And for a long time, I was doing a lot of this by accident or with some intention, but not as much as I'd like everyone here to have. And that gets me on to why I started the show, which we'll probably have to park for a future conversation because I don't want this one to take too long. I started getting involved in business and entrepreneurship specifically as kind of a late teenager, eventually dropping out of university to pursue that full time, and ended up serving some of the biggest clients in the UK, companies like Nike, Nando's, AKQA, Super Dry, Sports Direct. I almost get those two confused sometimes. Don't at me. Facebook, this is before they were Meta. And over the years, tried my hand at a couple of startups. And all of those things I either failed at or left behind, despite some apparent successes or some things that felt good. But the success, I promise you, was very limited. Didn't make much money, didn't get very far, didn't get to know many people. But what I did get was a firsthand feeling of failure and what that actually therefore means. The opportunity to reframe failure as, as opportunities. And so now I'm at a stage where I have 3 to 4 failed or meager left behind businesses under my belt, experience as an operator, so someone who supports startups and founders in mostly here in the UK, and someone who's also had multiple stop-start projects in between those other failures, so even more failures on top. And all these years later, the place that this has left me in is a place of a lot of perspective that's given me. But I also got myself trained in some of the things that I love most. Things like this, now that was mostly self-teaching, or things like coaching. I'm really interested in neurology and how the brain works, like I mentioned earlier. And so I do some of those things a little bit and have done for a little while, but I realize that there's a greater picture here that I'd like to contribute to. And that picture essentially can be summarized as a question. And that question is, what does it really mean to be a leader? And how do we find those leaders around us? How do we know if that person might even be us? So I suppose that's a few questions, not just one. A big question and some sub-questions. Let's call it that. And so now I'm in an interesting place where I've decided to start this show to bring together people that I've been lucky enough, privileged enough to have met and gotten to know and to have in my network over the last few years, primarily working with startups and businesses. Now, what you'll notice in the early stages of this show is that I am speaking to a lot of people in and around really roughly the entrepreneurship spaces. And the reason for that is because it's a lot of my network, but it's also, and I think this is a really important initial piece of understanding to start with, is that leaders manifest in a few different ways. And as entrepreneurs, is probably the most common type in our society. If you think back a few hundred years ago, leaders would have been aristocracy, maybe, and local community leaders, whether that was religious leaders or something else, maybe a village leader. Often they were similar or overlapping. And now, a few hundred years later, that has shifted and molded. We have politicians instead of aristocracy, for the most part. And we have entrepreneurs instead of the community leaders for the most part. We also have people in leadership positions in bigger organizations that we maybe wouldn't call entrepreneurs, but they're in business. And we do still have local community leaders of all kinds. This might be in organizations, but it's also very likely in local communities. Depending on where you live, this might manifest in different ways. But out of all of that, it's entrepreneurship that is the most common. It's entrepreneurs who are probably the most prominent. And as those who have to be scrappy and those who often have particular motivations, that was also the place I wanted to start with the most. So now that you know a little bit more about me, hopefully you can get some perspective, not just on what we're doing here, but also why I started this show. Having been through the kind of really weird, challenging ups and downs, the roller coaster of a life that I've had, I've been left with some thoughts and some questions, and it has turned into a really strong desire to get to know this space that you and I are here to discover together in more depth. And it's left me with a feeling that if only more of the people in positions of power or influence could take the perspectives of what it means to be a leader, really put themselves in that position and actively try to put themselves in that position, to take the responsibility required to have that perspective and the privilege of leading. Well, I wonder what kind of world we would live in. So perhaps you and I can help make that world happen together, piece by piece, slowly, but not too slowly, because the time is now to make things happen. And I'm excited to have you here. Hopefully, when you're listening to this, if you haven't listened to the show yet, there are a few episodes that you can go and catch up on. And, well, that's pretty much it. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being here on this journey, for taking this journey with me. It's all a journey of discovery into what it means to be a leader, and it should be an exciting one. So just thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate the time you spend listening to us have our conversations, and let's all do a little bit of learning and growing together. All right. Thanks so much, and see you soon.